Fear of rejection and fear of abandonment are certainly similar, but they hold some really important differences. In fact, what you do to heal your fear of rejection is not necessarily what you do to heal your fear of abandonment. So, although they're closely related, they're still distinct emotional experiences and they show up differently in your relationships, in your self perceptions, and certainly in your coping mechanisms. So, today you'll learn all about the differences and how to apply specific tools for each so you can heal and find a healthy balance in all your relationships. So, stay tuned. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm very happy you're here. I'm really excited to announce that the workbook, Boundaries Made Easier. If you're watching on YouTube, you get to see it. And or you can just jump over to Amazon if you're listening while you're listening. The workbook, Boundaries Made Easier, it is out. It is a standalone book. If you have my initial book, Boundaries Made Easy, Your Roadmap to Connection, Ease, and Joy. There's some different chapters in this one. I took out a whole last section of the first book and I put in 2 different chapters at the end of this workbook. And the workbook is chock full. It is like 230 pages and it's huge. It's like a big workbook. So I'm feeling pretty excited. So there's a lot of overlap, obviously. I took, so much from the Boundaries Made Easy, my original book, and I expanded it and I just gave more things to work on. So there you go. All right. So I'm excited. Please check it out. And if you have bought any of my books, which are behind me in my video, if you're watching on YouTube, they look fabulous. I have them all set up. Any of my books, even my earlier Amazon #1 bestseller, I like to remind folks, yes, Be Happily Married, even if your partner won't do a thing. And then the Boundaries Made Easy in the workbook, they're all on Amazon. And if you can, or you could get them also through my website. But if you could leave a review would be huge for me and for the books to gather more attention. Okay, so let me tell you, this topic has come up because I've had so many clients, and I'm going to apologize to all my clients and to all of you first, in that I have often used fear of rejection and fear of abandonment synonymously, meaning, right, that I have sort of interchanged them, as I think so many people do, or they just group it together like it's one thing. And with one of my dear clients, I don't know what, 40 years of doing this, you get better. Let's hope we get better and better, right? Let's hope that I keep growing as a psychologist, therapist, coach, whatever, that I keep growing in the work I do with you guys. And I've learned, I was realizing with this one client, I'm like, wow, she's really got more of a fear of abandonment than a fear of rejection. But at other times it seemed like a fear of rejection. And the things I was assigning to her to help her feel better were different. And she's really my inspiration for this entire episode. And of course, then this always happens. I'll do something with one client, and then next thing I know, 10 other clients come with the same issue. Or in my Patreon community, the One Love Collective, people were coming with things, and I thought, oh, perfect. Let's do an episode on it. So you've probably felt both at some point. Let me say that first, right? Sort of that sting of rejection and the panic of abandonment. That's how I think of them a little differently initially. The rejection has an initial kind of sting, whereas abandonment, there's more of a panic, that kind of thing. With rejection, we don't always go, oh no, we don't always do that same thing. There's not like the panic in the same way. So that right there might be a discernment for you about which one you fall into. But no worries, I'm going to give you everything today. So they're often confused, again, some in the past by yours truly, but these fears really do manifest differently, and they really do require different healing approaches. And I'm starting to believe that after doing this work and working with my clients, that maybe the reason you haven't healed this issue in the past is because maybe you have the other one more. I think all of us experience kind of both of them a little bit, but you might be driven by one versus the other. It's the same way that when we're treating people for mental health issues, some people have a primary, let's say, anxiety. They have a primary anxiety. And when they're anxious, they end up feeling depressed. Okay. Because of their anxiety stops them from doing things. And then they're not doing things long enough. And then they get depressed and worried, right? Other people are very depressed and then aren't getting out of bed. So aren't doing things. And that's causing them anxiety. And when medications are being given to people, it's very important to see which the driver is, because you'll have a different you might prescribe different medications. And that's often, again, why some people have anxiety or it seems like primary anxiety, and they take an anti-anxiety medication and it doesn't really work or work well, but then they take an antidepressant and it works better. And that's not the only reason. There's a lot of complexity when it comes to the science of medications, but that's what I've noticed. I've had many, many, many talks with psychiatrists over the years about my clients, and I've said to them, I know you're prescribing this, but they really are anxious. And I know, because a psychiatrist only sees them. I'm seeing them an hour a week, let's say, right? For sometimes weeks, months, years. They're seeing them once and then that's it, like for an hour, and they're supposed to get all their information. They're limited, if that's the way the eval is done, like through your insurance, let's say. So it's often good, and if you are looking to get a psychiatrist, it's really wonderful to have your therapist sign a release of information, if you have one, for the psychiatrist, because we can give them this kind of information and they can do better about prescribing meds. Okay. So, but that's what I think happens with fear of abandonment and rejection sometimes. I think they're getting confused. So let's talk first about how they differ. I'm gonna go deep on all this, and some of the stuff repeats on purpose. I really did a lot of work on this in my notes and thinking it through. And I think it's such kind of small differences in some ways. I want to just keep talking about it till you really get where you are. So fear of rejection is about feeling not good enough and feeling like you're being turned away for like who you are. So it's really tied to self-worth and a belief that you're like inherently flawed or just inherently unlovable, like that this is there. And if someone knew that, they knew who I really was, they wouldn't like me. Fear of abandonment is about being left behind and that just emotional devastation that follows when that happens. So fear of abandonment is really tied to your security and to your attachment, and much more to your attachment and your attachment style than rejection. It often stems from a fear of being alone or unsupported in some way. And again, I'll go deeper on that. So here's how it shows up in relationships. With a fear of rejection, if you have that, which is again anchored in a lower self-esteem that somehow feels, again, at your core, like you're just not a lovable human, or if they really knew me, they wouldn't love me kind of thing. If you have that, you might have some of the following. You might never or rarely express your true thoughts and feelings, which of course, when you don't express your true thoughts and feelings, you can avoid anybody disapproving of you, right? You might people please or fawn in efforts to be liked and accepted, even if it's draining to you. You might hesitate to initiate relationships or conversations, or you might really hesitate to, of course, ask for what you need once you're in a relationship. And this could be friendships, by the way. This could be romance, anything. You might feel shame when you're criticized or feel like you're being excluded, or even when you're just getting feedback of any kind, any feedback, there's like a deep embarrassment or shame that floods your system. If you can feel like your stomach drop out kind of thing, or feeling like you got hot all over or your face getting red, that's an autonomic nervous response. Like that isn't like your nervous system responding, your automatic nervous system responding, that emergency part of your nervous system. That means this is real, like old trauma biology kind of stuff, right? So, and you probably struggle to separate feedback from your self-worth. Like any feedback is a grind on your self-worth. You might also withdraw or from, relationships first or reject others first to avoid being rejected to avoid them doing it. So that's where I see the most self-sabotage, um, right? When it comes to your relationships in these kind of ways. You might also avoid situations where you could be judged. So you really avoid any kind of public speaking, raising your hand in a meeting, dating, social events. You might be avoiding a lot of that stuff. You might constantly seek validation and feel anxious without some sort of external approval, right? All of that is really holds true when there's a fear of rejection, okay? Now, if you have a fear of abandonment, again, and that's anchored a little differently in you, yeah, your self-esteem, but also in that insecure attachment, right? That's more where that's anchored. You might become anxious when you think someone's pulling away because you're afraid, just so you know, subconsciously you feel like they're going to leave permanently. So if your partner or a friend, has other things going on, so maybe they're distracted by work or something else, you become highly anxious and need constant reassurance. Um, you're probably already, you're probably always asking something like, "Are you mad at me? Are we okay?" That's very much in line with the abandonment. You also, if you have fear of abandonment, might cling to relationships, even really unhealthy or toxic ones, because you just can't think of being alone. You might also do that and then I call it the trapeze artist, you never let go of one relationship until you're already in another one, or pretty close to already being in another one. There's at least been some almost like emotional cheating there. You might be that person. You also might overcompensate by being like overly available, overly accommodating, needy, just maybe a little clingy. With fear of abandonment, you might feel panic or despair when you think you're being ignored or left out. Notice I always say when you perceive or when you think, because a lot of these situations you're not. I've talked many a person off the ledge, I'll tell you that. And again, right, like I'm saying, like you likely see this everywhere, even though it's not really what's happening, or possibly, possibly it's only happening because your neediness becomes too much for other people. So they do pull away. So you might get anxious when, like anytime someone is just not 100% like in your sight or I love you or in the moment or all over you. You might even get anxious when someone takes longer than usual to text you back, right? Just that kind of thing. If you have a fear of abandonment, you're likely over investing or overextending in your relationships overall, I guess is what I'm saying, to keep people from leaving. And you probably have a really difficult time feeling calm if other people aren't, like, again, right there, like physically or emotionally or in some way. Um, with this, I also see you probably struggle with separation anxiety, which is kind of funny, like, that comes up a lot. That's not just dogs who are have separation anxiety, or little kids. Adults have it too. People often miss it. Um, and it's interesting even to just identify it as such. A lot of folks don't, I'll say to a client sometimes, like, "Why you have real separation anxiety with your mom?" And they're like, "What?" They have never thought of it like that. They have never put it in those terms. And again, it's really fine to be close to people, but if you're anxious when you're not talking to them, or you're worried or just always thinking about them, that's a problem. Or if you just don't feel right, quote unquote, unless you've been talking to your mom or your sister or your partner, there's something off. That's not healthy. I say with love, I love you, but it's not healthy. So, because I do get into this with folks where, um, sometimes people are talking to I have multiple clients who talk to someone 5 or 6 times a day, or 2, 3, 4 times a day. Like, that's someone, if it's your partner, I guess, although I don't think I talk to my partner. I mean, when I'm with them, we're talking, but I mean, when we're apart, that's for sure not. Um, but they'll be talking to their mom or their dad or their sister or their aunt or whatever, their best friend, multiple times a day. That smacks of fear of abandonment to me. smacks of it. Like that there's some, and you might not think so. You might be arguing, no, Abby, I have such a close family. We're just really close knit. I would call that leaning a little towards too close. I say with love, like towards enmeshment. And you you want to be careful with that, especially if you have kids, because they become that way. And you might be thinking, well, that's exactly how I want them. Well, I would just, that's a whole other episode, but I would offer that that's not the healthiest of ways to raise kids. That's from the research, because those children become afraid in their lives. They don't take chances. They don't take risks in healthy ways. And they often end up sort of, again, just repeating those cycles of fear. And, you don't ever want your kids in fear. Like, I don't think any of us think, oh, I want to raise my kid to be fearful. So, that's all I would say there. But regardless, again, I'm not coming for you in your parenting style. We're all different, and that's fine. And just notice when things go to fear. So let's talk about how your fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, how they impact your self-perception, which is, basically how you see yourself, right? And that's also different depending on where you fit into this. If you have a predominant fear of rejection, you likely think either consciously or subconsciously, I'm unworthy of love and acceptance. So imagine bringing that into any relationship, right? And if you have a predominant fear of abandonment, you're likely thinking, I'm always alone or I'll always be left behind. Do you see the difference there? And again, you can see how that's a problem going into a relationship. So people with fear of rejection often struggle with self-esteem issues, right? And they internalize rejection as like proof that they're not good enough. That's how they see it. But people with a fear of abandonment struggle with emotional security, right? Just feeling secure, and see abandonment as proof that they are fundamentally unlovable or will always end up alone. I'm hoping I'm differentiating these well for you. That's why I'm repeating things, so that you can really come back to it in some way. You know what I mean? Keep thinking, keep noticing the nuances. So if you have a fear of rejection, you're, again, avoiding risks in your relationships. You're not expressing needs. You're seeking a lot of external validation, approval, praise, that kind of thing. There's a lot of perfectionism here because you don't want any judgment because you're so sensitive to it. Yeah, I see perfectionism way more here than with abandonment, believe it or not. You likely withdraw again or reject someone else first because you don't want to be rejected. So obviously that shows up in a lot in relationships. And you likely isolate after you've felt a rejection. So any perceived rejection that's going on, you likely isolate. And again, you can see how much that affects your relationships. So now you're talking to your partner and you're trying to have a great, intimate conversation, and you're feeling attacked, even though they're just trying to say something to you. And you might have as you're listening, you might realize this is your partner. I get this a lot. People say to me, no matter what I say to my partner, they always feel attacked. That is someone who has high rejection sensitivity. Okay. And I did a whole other episode on just rejection. So, no, it's not true. I think that says rejection and abandonment too. I think I mixed them together. How do you like that? Well, here I am writing that wrong. Okay. No, but that has a lot of good information in it that you might want to go back to. Now, with fear of abandonment, remember, we're really overcompensating by being kind of overly accommodating or too self-sacrificing in our relationships. So you can see how that really shows up with so much codependency and so much fawning, probably. If you haven't heard about fawning, there's fight, flight, freeze, fawn, which was coined by Peter Wheeler, I do believe. But I did an entire episode that your people pleasing might be fawning. It might be a trauma response. I'll link to that in the show notes. You might want to go back and listen to that. If you are like a crazy codependent person, it's possible that that's where you are. Also with fear of abandonment, again, you become anxious when your relationships feel distant or uncertain. So you could see how you're always trying to maybe lock things down. In dating, I see this a lot. Someone will say to me like, well, he hasn't told me he loves me yet, or she hasn't said we're boyfriend, girlfriend yet, or whatever. And they want to like lock it down. And it's maybe 3 weeks in or a month in or 2 months in. I'm like, could you just like, let's let it roll. Let's see what unfolds. Let's see what happens a little bit. But people with this fear of abandonment get super anxious in that spot. They almost can't manage it. Again, so I'm going to see a lot of codependency or just this excessive reliance on other people for emotional security. It's like somehow you don't feel safe and okay unless someone else is in the picture. There's a lot of you who feel like unless you have a partner, you're not going to be safe in life. And I don't know. It's like, no, that's just not true. It's just not true. Again, I see a lot of like clinging to people and tolerating a lot of mistreatment to avoid being left. And that's one of the biggies. I see people in these super unhealthy relationships, which I see less of. If you have a fear of rejection, that's a little different. You're often running away first anyway. But I would say the abandonment people are the one who really stay in the very sick, toxic relationships way too long. And they know it themselves. They're beating themselves up about it. But they're just so terrified of being alone. Or if you're so terrified that the other person is going to go find someone else and be with someone else, that's abandonment. That's what that is. The rejection too, that'll sting you a little when they're with someone else, but there's something that happens with people of overriding fear of abandonment they don't want to break up, mostly because they don't want the other person to go be happier and they're going to be left alone, because that's the only scenario they can envision. So, and again, there's just all that constant reassurance seeking, all those like reassurance seeking behaviors that happen that are a real problem. So, but let me talk about a little bit about where they overlap, because of course they do. So both fears definitely lead to people pleasing. It's just different, the level of it, I would say. Both fears lead to a lot of difficulty setting boundaries and just, I think, like a overall emotional distress in relationships. Both definitely come from, I believe, stem from early childhood experiences, right? So emotional neglect, inconsistent caregiving, parents with, dysfunctional styles, or maybe a past trauma. So it doesn't always have to come from you might have had a very healthy childhood and then your, mom died of cancer, and she was gone in 3 weeks when you were 17, and all of a sudden everything changes, right? So it's not always because you were like, beaten as a kid. And I hope people understand that. I think when I use the words trauma or dysfunction, people go to really crazy places with that. Like not crazy. They go to very extreme places with that. And like a lot of times I'll say trauma, people are like, well, I wasn't in a war or raped or anything. And it's like, whoa, there's a lot of trauma outside of those two things, which clearly are very traumatic, but there's a lot of trauma that happens or dysfunction that happens outside of that kind of realm, which is much more subtle. So, and it still affects your adult relationships. Other similarities, I would say that both fears definitely can result in self-sabotage. Again, I think, yeah, they both can do it. I think, but I think they're different though. I think so. People who have overriding fear of rejection are usually pushing people away, and people with an overriding fear of abandonment are holding on too tightly, or and that sabotages the relationship because other people just, there's only so much you can tell someone that you love them. There's only so much you can tell, and then they keep not believing it. It gets exhausting. There's only so much, of where are you? What are you doing? What's happening? Why don't we go together? It's interesting to me. Sometimes I'll have a couple, and this happens a lot sometimes in couple sessions, and they'll be talking about all this difficulty, like so-and-so doesn't like to go to parties with the other person because they're more introverted, the other's more extroverted, or something like that. And I'll say, well, why don't you just not go together? And it is like I said, why don't you chop up babies and eat them? I mean, people are like, what do you mean? Like, well, I'm not saying do everything separately, but if like, Gary doesn't like to shop for clothes. I go do that with other people. I don't drag that poor man with me shopping. You know what I mean? He goes on a run. I don't need to go. I don't want to run, there's little things like that. So why wouldn't it be for other things too? Like, why are we always thinking that anything that's social has to be both of us? It does not. Or, unless it's like a girl's night or a guy's night or a them night or whatever. It's like I it can be just you go. It's all right. You'll be fine. You might even, dare I say, have a better time. And I hear people say, "Well, there's all couples." I'm like, "And you're still in a couple. You just don't have that person there." Are you saying like I don't even know what you're saying. Unless you're all square dancing and you need another person physically there. Do you remember having a square dance in elementary school? Is that just because I'm old thing? Is that an I'm old thing? You can comment under the video or let me know or shoot me an email. When I was growing up, we had to do square dancing. We had to learn square dancing. Yes, in New York. Yes. Because you had to do different, but did we learn to waltz and stuff? I don't even remember. I took ballroom dance in college thinking that would be an easy A, and I could not have been more wrong. Yeah, brought down my GPA. Yeah, that's right. Ballroom dance. That crap is hard. Anyway, I digress, as I do. So if you resonate with both, fear of abandonment and fear of rejection, it's normal. And the fears overlap. But again, it is also important to distinguish them, right? It really is. And I had, you know what? I don't even know where hold on. Sometimes I have to take notes to look at. Don't move. Maybe I already said these. Let me see. Sorry. I don't usually stop, do I? No, it's fine. I've said all this. Okay. I just want to make sure I'm covering. I have to look at my notes sometimes. So basically, I think what I'm saying is if you, how else can I say it? If you shrink away from opportunities, it's likely fear of rejection. And if you feel anxious when someone pulls away, it's likely fear of abandonment. Those are your predominant things. How's that? That was pretty good, actually. I like those. Okay. I'll try to remember to write those down when I write up the notes. All right. So let's talk about the healing differences. So I hope I've covered enough there. It's like, I really want to make sure you understand. So healing from a fear of rejection really involves, building self-worth, learning that rejection isn't a reflection of personal failure, right? And practicing self-acceptance. I would say those are the biggies. And healing from a fear of abandonment involves, it can do all those too, but really you're looking more here to creating emotional security, to understanding that being alone doesn't mean being unloved, doesn't mean that you're a loser, doesn't mean that you that there's something wrong with you. And you really want to focus on developing healthy attachments rather than anxious or avoidant ones. Okay. So, and I'm going to give you some, I'm going to give it to you right now because that's what I do, right? But I do want to give a shout out in my One Love Collective online Patreon community, which we started in mid-January of 2025, and I'm having a ball in there. I don't know. I hope the rest of you are too. I'm offering, the reason the One Love Collective is so great is because or one of the reasons, because there's many, in addition to the live Q&As with me and, getting the podcast without commercials and all that stuff, I'm offering, they're going to get deeper journal prompts, and a lot of them, they're really good. I'm excited. They're going to get healing exercises and really more to help you heal your fears of rejection and abandonment for good. So there's a bunch, I think I have like 10 things I'm including in the community for this one. So if you're interested in having access to those things, you have two choices, because you could get all that. If this particular topic is really interesting to you, you can either join the One Love Collective. There's 3 tiers. There's a $5 tier, a $8 tier, and a $12 tier. I'm pretty sure that's how they are. Correct me if I'm wrong. Where you get different things in each tier. And again, you get lots of other goodies, including that live access to me. I do live Q&As in there. Like it's I'm enjoying them. Anyway, but if you don't want to make a commitment to the group, I get it. Like you're like, I don't want to have a monthly recurring thing. I don't want to be in your little One Love Collective, Abby. It's not my jam. Totally fine. You can also buy the bundle of extras for $8. So at the very end of today's episode, I'll list everything you'll be getting if you're interested, right? And obviously all the ways to get them and all that. So I'm just going to say that. It's all going to be there at the end. Keep listening till we're done and I'll list all the things and then you can decide if that's something that you want. And if you're in the One Love Collective, you might want to listen. Well, you already know what you get because you'll see it. All right. So let's talk about healing your fear of rejection. To heal your fear of rejection, you want to ask yourself, to me, a few major questions to dig a little deeper. So, you can speak to a qualified health professional for this. You can do some deep journaling. You can self-reflect in meaningful ways, however you choose to do it. Go to a clergy member or a good friend who's healthy. But here's what I'd like you to kind of reflect on, journal on, ask yourself, talk to a therapist about. What patterns do I notice in my relationships that stem from my fear of rejection? Because of all the things I listed, right? What patterns do you have? You've got patterns. Okay. I always self-sabotage and here's the way I always do it, whatever. Then I want you to ask yourself, what do I believe rejection says about me? What do I believe rejection says about me? And is that belief true? Is it true? So, when someone rejects me, what do I believe that means? Or again, my perceived rejection, because trust me, and is that even rejection? Maybe even throw that in there. And is that belief true? And then I want you to ask, and this is really important. Like, again, I would do these all at different times, but what is one rejection that I've experienced that actually led to something better? Right? Getting fired from a job or someone breaking up with you that actually led to something better, right? Not getting picked for the softball team or, what has led to something better? I know you can name things that haven't, but what has led to something better? Because they're absolutely there. Then when we talk about healing your fear of abandonment, right? To heal that, I want you to do the same things, ask yourself these questions to dig a little deeper. Again, speaking to someone qualified, or again, it could be deep journaling though. And when I say deep journaling, I mean like you set a timer for 30 minutes at least, and you just write and see what comes out. And again, so this would be, how do I behave in relationships when I fear someone will leave me? What do I do? I would ask yourself that again, or talk to a therapist about it. It's your best friend if they're really healthy. Okay. How do I behave in relationships when I fear someone will leave me? Then I want you to ask, what's one belief I have about abandonment that I could challenge? What is a belief that I have about abandonment that I could challenge? And so I would write down my beliefs first. Abandonment means, abandonment is, whatever that is for you. Right. And write that out. And then what beliefs could you challenge? Then I would ask, if I knew I would never truly be abandoned. Okay. If I knew I would never be truly abandoned, how would I behave differently? That's a really good one. If I do say so myself. And by the way, so I think everyone knows at this point, I write up a blog post for every single episode of the podcast. So you can go to abbymedcalf.com and just go to the relationship tips and tools page, which is the blog, go to the podcast page, look for this episode. And so all those questions I just asked, you might be going like, oh no, I didn't write those down and I got to listen to the whole thing again or whatever. You can just go over there and copy and paste because yes, I love you. Who loves you? Abby loves you. And so I do that so that you can go there and we get a lot of people who come to the blog and I'm happy about that. It's free. There's no I don't know. There's no gates that you have to get through or you don't have to leave your email. You just go get it. Just go get it. I know it's hard these days to believe that people are not doing sleazy things, but I am not doing sleazy things. I've been here this is coming to we're 3/4 into season 7 of the podcast. And other than 4 weeks a year, I've been here every single week for years. And I've been giving you the goods for years. If you don't believe me by now, I don't know what to say. Like, you've got bigger issues than I can solve probably, because at this point you should be trusting me. My Lord, people. I say with love, but come on. I have never not delivered. Even though, even right now, I have this online Patreon community where people do pay. Yes, it's okay for me to earn money, and but I still give it away for free here. You still get a ton here if you never pay a penny, because that's how it should be. That was my mission to begin with, and I will continue to do that till I stop the podcast. Which, by the way, I haven't thought of. I guess one day I will. Right now, I love it. So as long as I love it, I'm going to be here. So go look that up go get that if you want. And let's talk about how to heal both fears in your relationship, regardless of which fear you might relate to more, because there really are some common things you can do to heal both, which makes sense, right? One is practice secure attachments. I will link to the episodes I've done on attachment styles. I've done a lot. If you have my boundaries book, I have a whole chapter on attachment. It's everywhere. So, if you tend to pull away, that fear of rejection, you want to challenge yourself to be vulnerable in safe relationships, right? If you have a tendency to cling, which is the fear of abandonment, you need to practice some self-soothing instead of seeking external reassurance all the time. Okay? I know. Having healthy self-esteem is obviously something you need to work on. I long ago did a great episode called 8 Ways to Build Your Confidence and Self-Esteem. Again, I'll link to it. Again, you can search on my website for keywords. Again, it's a chapter in my Boundaries Made Easy book. There's a lot of places you can get this information. I'm not going to repeat it all here, but you really want to work on self-esteem. The other thing I want you to do is separate fact from feeling. So next time you feel rejected or abandoned, write down the situation as objectively as possible. What actually happened? No, so-and-so was a jerk to me is not fact. So-and-so said XYZ to me is the fact. Okay. You probably even misheard that a little, but we'll go with that. Do you see the difference? One is a judgment. One is just the facts. Some so-and-so was really late to our meeting. That's not even a fact. So-and-so, because hear how laden with judgment that is. So-and-so was at the meeting 20 minutes after we started. I mean to get like that to help yourself get out of the judgment and criticism and get into what actually happened. And then you want to ask yourself, what meaning am I assigning to this? Is this an old wound being triggered, or is there real evidence here, right? You got to do that work. The next thing would be to create a self-validation practice in some way. Set a daily affirmation, related to your biggest fear. Okay. You can do every day. If you have a fear of rejection, it would be something like, I'm worthy, even if others don't always approve of me. Oh, I actually like that one. I'm worthy, even if others don't always approve of me. How's that? Or don't always approve. It's not even of you. They just don't always approve. Look at me putting more judgment there. See, we learn as we go. If you have a fear of abandonment, it might be, I'm whole and secure even when I'm alone. I'm never lonely because I always have me. Something like that. The next thing you want to do is work on your insecurity. You got to do it. You're insecure because of your habitual thoughts and actions. Okay? That's why you're insecure. Insecurity is a habit of thought, and you have to change that habit of thought. All of this is a habit of thought. So if you want to move past your fears of rejection or abandonment or both, you need to work on your insecurity. And surprise, surprise, I did a whole episode on how to stop being insecure in your relationships. That's what it's called. Again, I'll link to it in the show notes and in the blog. They'll all be linked under the video if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe, please. I love building my little YouTube. And if I get enough people on YouTube, I might be doing some YouTube lives and some other stuff. So come on along. Leave some comments. Tell me how it's going. But do you get it? Right? You got to work on the insecurity. You got to do it. And again, I have all the ways how and all the stuff. And the last thing I would say, you knew you couldn't get through an episode. Okay. Could you get through an episode with Abby without her mentioning, drum roll, I'll do it on my desk. You hear that? Mindfulness. Yes. I'm going to mention mindfulness. It's the key. So you can notice when you're having these reactions in the moment. I can teach you every great tool in the world, but if you don't remember to use them when you need them, you won't be able to fully move forward. I've said this a million times. I know. But I love you, babies. I love you. Please, you've got to make this a daily practice. I have a mindfulness starter kit. It is free. You will be put on yeah, it's a big scam. It's free, but you do have to put in your email because you will be placed on my love letter list where I send you inspiration twice a month. That's what the second and fourth Wednesday of the month, you'll get a love letter. It doesn't sell anything. All I'm trying to do is help you feel better. That's it. It's a little story. It's short. It's a little pithy, thing of life, something to make you think differently, something to hopefully motivate you, inspire you. That's all it is. Telling you. I announce when I have new, I'll probably announce the workbook on there or something, but how often do I come out with new stuff? A couple times a year. So I'll announce it in it, like as a PS. It's not ever the point. It's not like some newsletter where I'm like, this week I spoke at this place and I did that. It's nothing like that. It is truly a letter of love to you, hoping to connect, hoping that you'll find yourself in a good week. And if you don't like it, you can unsubscribe. There's many tens of thousands of people on there. I'm not going to know if you unsubscribe. So it's okay. And you will still have your mindfulness starter kit. Okay. So go get it. There's also a meditation starter kit, free also, just saying, but start with the mindfulness. So, and I want to say this, the goal isn't to never feel rejected or abandoned, because obviously that's impossible. It's the goal is to build enough inner security that those fears don't control you and don't negatively affect your relationships, and most importantly, the relationship with yourself. That's the one I really care about. I love you. You're hurting yourself. It makes me nuts. Stop it. Stop it. Is that a psychological skill? Just stop it. Okay. So there's a place here where I want to rank on Mel Robbins' let them theory, which anyway, but I'm not because I'm going to take the higher road on this. Look at me. I'm taking the higher road, which I'm not because I mentioned it and called it out. So I know I'm being a little bitchy. All right. I'm going to back up. I know I wish her well, and anybody who follows her, I have a problem with, I have a problem with people who aren't in my field, who have never worked as therapists. She's a Yale trained lawyer. God bless. That was hard to get into. Coming into to what I consider my field and sort of, saying things, the 5-second rule, this, and making it like a whole book, by the way, when it could be 2 pages. And there's no whole book there. It seemed like there wasn't with the 5-minute rule. Again, the 5-second rule, whatever I say with love. It was like a pamphlet, both of them. But beyond that, and by the way, at least the second one was someone else's idea that was taken. But beyond that is, it's like I would never go practice law, even if I learned a lot about law. I wouldn't go practice it and say, I'm a lawyer. Like I should give millions of people advice on this. Do you know what I'm saying? Even if I learned a lot about it. But for some reason in my field, in psychology, and that's what makes me crazy, we seem to think that's okay, that people are a real housewife or whatever, or I'm famous and I've done some of my own therapy, which is lovely. And now I'm doing this whole thing. If you're famous and you have fame and you have, reputable people, you have Esther Perel on your show, then I'm very happy about it. And you're having a conversation from real life to that. I'm all for it. But the people who are just sort of out there talking to other famous people about, I don't even know. I mean, I know you listen, I know you like it. It's good entertainment, but just remember, these are not qualified professionals. And I don't just mean going to school. Going to school is going to school. I mean, when you have years of deep knowledge about something, it's like saying that an apprentice plumber knows the same things as a plumber who's been doing it for 30 years. Of course, an apprentice plumber doesn't know the same. We wouldn't expect them, even though they went to school, they learned all the stuff. It's different at the end. And so, yes, I have issues with this because I find so many people hurt, because they're getting bad information. It's probably the reason I'll do this podcast until I don't have any breath left. Please be mindful of who you listen to. And, pop psychology is very nice, but there really is something to be said for people with a lot of experience in these fields, because there's so much that you don't understand that we bring to the table. Well, you do understand because you have your own specialty and know the difference when you've had years of experience. You can sort of hear when something's off. You sort of know, you can look ahead to what the problems might be that people who just are doing this don't have. So I just want to say that because I love you. And I'm not saying you have to listen to me. Go, I'm saying, but be with people who are qualified to be teaching you. That's what I'm asking you to do. Okay. And so my final thoughts, we'll get into a positive place. Actually, that was positive to me. I'm open. I'm honest. You should know. You should know. I'm sitting here telling you to listen to me, so you should know what I think, right? There should be some transparency at that level. I want to say this. You are not defined by your fear of abandonment or your fear of rejection. They are, yes, generally some deep wounds, but they don't have to dictate your life. And I think when you recognize the differences and the similarities, but the differences, it really starts to you challenge your beliefs. You start practicing self-compassion, you create stronger relationships, and you have a healthier relationship with yourself. And that is what I want you to do. All right. So that is it for today. If you want to hang on and listen to what the bundle is and what the extras are that are coming to the One Love Collective, and or if you want to buy the bundle for $8, I'm going to give it to you now. But in the meantime, if you want to sign off, I love you a lot and have a really just an amazing, beautiful, mindful week. All right. It's just us. It's just us here. So Tier 1 of which is the inner circle is going to be getting this a healing exercise I created called Creating Emotional Security, and then another healing exercise called Reframing Rejection and Abandonment, and then an identifying where I fit worksheet. So I kind of just laid it all out so you could do little checks to see where you lie more on the abandonment side or on the rejection side, right? Just to help you self-diagnose, so to speak, a little bit more. If you are in Tier 2, which is the Love Accelerator, you're getting, again, everything in Tier 1, and you're getting the journaling prompts for abandonment and journaling prompts for rejection. And I spent a lot of time on those. And yeah, so there's 10 of each, I think. And if you're in Tier 3, which is the VIP Love Lab, you are getting everything in 1, everything in 2, and I went crazy on some worksheets for you. I did a worksheet for fear of abandonment and finding safety in relationships. And then I did a separate one for fear of rejection and finding safety in relationships. Because I was thinking well, what do we really want on the other end? It's safety in relationships. So if you're at that level, again, you get all of that. I know, right? I'm telling you, I have so much fun creating the homework assignments for you guys. You don't even know. Or not the homework, the follow-up. Because I'm just thinking, I don't think you're going to do all the follow-up for everyone. I just think there's some like this, if this is a big issue for you. I want it to feel like a masterclass in it. I want it to feel like I'm getting therapy in a way, right? I am going deep on these things. And if you do work with a therapist, they are wonderful, wonderful things to bring in to say, hey, Abby gave me these prompts and here's what I said, and bring it to your therapist, talk about it, go deeper there. Come into the One Love Collective and maybe share. I would love to hear, what you noticed, what came up for you. I'd love to hear that. And so would other people. We can learn from each other. It's not just me. So I'm throwing that all out there. And if you are someone, again, who's listening and doesn't want to join the One Love Collective, that's fine. And you could get all that for the $8. All right. That is it. I am out this week, or I'm out for this week. Sorry, I'm not out this week. I'm working all week. I am out right now for this. And, how lucky am I? How lucky am I? I feel like I'm one of the luckiest people on the planet that I get to do this and be here with you and have this relationship, because it's just such a huge part of my life. I can't say enough. All right. Love you. And I'll talk to you soon.